In this video, I'm going to create a sprite sheet for my two images that I have here. My first button here for when the sound is unmuted, and this other one for when the sound is muted. And I want them to be clickable, so when I click this button, it changes to the other image and back. In my previous videos, I've built the HTML and CSS as well as created my two drawings. If you have other images, that is fine, and if your HTML and CSS is different, that is also fine. As long as you have some HTML, CSS that shows at least one of your images and you have two images that are the exact same size. So let's go. The whole idea with sprite sheets is that you have just one image for all your images. One file, one artboard. So here, rather than having two distinct artboards, we want just one. And that means that rather than having just this one here and this one here, we're going to have one artboard. So I'm going to select my artboards, and if I can delete this without deleting the content, I could. Excellent. And then this one I'm going to make twice the size. And you can always go up here to the width. Make sure that you have selected the upper left corner as reference point so it expands in this direction and this. And then you can always go here to your size and just say multiply by 2, and it will be double the width. So excellent. And now go and select your other button. It was already selected, and then move it, and you can press shift but to make sure that you move it in a straight line. And then if I let go of it here, you can see that it intersects at exactly 128 here, but it doesn't here. This one actually goes to, if I look at the transform, it goes from 2.5 pixels to 126.5. That's a very annoying position. So I'm going to move that, select everything, select my transform, and move it to 2 pixels. And then this one here, I have to make sure that starts as 128 plus 2. And if I can't calculate it myself, I can just write 128 plus 2. So now these two images are exactly the same distance from the start point at 0 and start point at 128. Because in my images, I use 128 as my width. If you have used 200 and 150 or some other number, then just make sure that you have the same distance and the same height. And now I have a sprite sheet. I need to export. So let's go export for screens. This is my button unmuted. I'm going to call it my mute button. Sprite sheet. Very long name, but that's okay. And export that. And then here in my CSS, I'm not going to use this old background image, but I'm going to use the sprite sheet that I call mute button sprite sheet, and it looks like that. Very bad, very bad. So, and usually we say, okay, but the background image should be 100%. But in this case, it shouldn't, because the background image should actually be, the background image is twice as wide as what we are displaying. So it should be 200%. But that doesn't make any difference at all, because I'm saying background image, I should say background size, 200%. And actually it should only be 200% in one direction. In the other it should be 100%. So 200% wide and 100% tall. So this is nice. This is the same button, but how do we change the look of it? Well, that is something we do with the background position. If that is at 0%, 0%, as it is now, it shows the first button. And then we can say, if we can change this to 1, 2, 20%, 30, 40, let's guess when the next one comes, 90, 100%. So this tells us where we start the next, or where we start the background. So imagine the background is kind of behind here, and it's kind of like we have a box with overflow hidden, and we then have the image we can move behind it. But it's just the background we move behind our box. So by moving the background from 0 to 100 and back, we can change the image. So let's do that in a class instead. Say we have our muted class as it looks right now. And then we're going to have the unmuted as it looks. Not right now, no. As it looks there. So the default one, let's get rid of that. And then we can always go, and when we would click the button, we should be able to say, okay, if this one here, this button here, if we add the class muted, then it's muted. And if not, then it's unmuted. Excellent. So now I just have to do that with JavaScript. In my JavaScript, I've got rid of everything else, but you might have some code for the rest of your game. I think that's all right, but let's focus on the settings right now. So we want these two buttons here to handle clicking. The mute SFX button and the mute music button. So I'm going to create a function for that. Function setup mute buttons. And just console log. And make sure we call the function. And you would probably do that in an open settings function or something like that. So let's select the mute SFX button and add an event listener of click, and that should call a function that it doesn't mute the sound effects, but it toggles them, because every time we click it, it should toggle. So let's call the function toggle. Toggle mute SFX. Just console log. Make sure we call that function here. And there would also be the other one, but I'm just going to concentrate on the sound effects button first. Let's just see if this works. If I can click it and it toggle. Yes, it should toggle. Okay, how should it do? Well, I can just try and select it. Document, query selector, mute, SFX button, class list, add, and it should add the muted class if it wasn't muted. So this works, but the next time it should toggle back. And in order for the JavaScript to remember if it was muted or not, I will have a variable That's actually going to be a flag that tells me if the sound effects are muted. So let say SFX now is muted equal to false, and then here I'm going to say if SFX is muted is equal to true. That means if they are already muted. No, let's start with an easy one. If they're not muted, if they are false, then we add the mute, and we also set SFX muted to true, and else we SFX is muted is set to false. That means if it is false, it is set to true, and else it is set to false. And then we remove the muted class. And this should work so that when I click, now they're muted, now they're not muted, now they're muted, now they're not muted. And then, of course, now I don't have an audio element. If I had, I would do something like this. First select my audio sounds. I don't know what they would be called. And then set muted to SFX is muted. And I would have to do that for every sound effect I have in the game. But I don't have any here in my demo. So just uncomment that and remind myself to do mute set all sound effect audio elements dot muted equal to SFX is muted. Cool. And now let's do the same for the music. I'm simply going to be lazy here and copy the entire function, but toggle mute music. Music. And here I'm going to create another variable that would say let music is muted. It should also be set to false. And I have to replace. Okay, this might not have. This might have been easier to just rewrite than copy, but never mind. Mute music button. Mute music button here. And to do set all sound effect audio elements, that would be set all music audio elements to what's called music is muted. Let's just do this. Music muted is music is muted. And I have to add the event listener as well. Toggle mute music button, toggle mute music. So I can mute the sound and I can mute the music. And if I ask here, is the music is muted? Yes, that is true. It is now muted. And if I ask again, it is now false. The music is not muted. So this is how you use Spritesheet, by simply having the images in one artboard in one file next to each other. And that's how you make a simple Spritesheet. Now it's time to expand it with animations.